passing over to the opening session, and then that will be followed by the first session on global market trends with a Q&A and a wrap up today. And we also will be having the event tomorrow starting at 9 a.m. with a second session of market trends on private sector perspectives, barriers, and opportunities for the Guyana forest sector with a Q&A and wrap up. And there's also an agenda for Thursday. Thursday and Friday will be starting at 10 a.m. Thursday with the community forest management session, improving revenues through good practices. And on Friday, there will be a session starting at 10 a.m. called Using Information Management Systems to Support VPA Implementation. So without further ado, I would like to present you all with Mr. James Singh from the Guyana Forestry Commission, who will officially open the event. Mr. James Singh served as Commissioner of Forests for the Guyana Forestry Commission for 21 years and has played a pivotal role in transforming the forest sector in Guyana over these years. His experience and knowledge has led to international recognition of Guyana's forest being one of the most sustainable in the world. He plays an active role in the EU FLECT VPA process, the Guyana MRBs and other projects of international and national importance. Mr. Singh has also served as a member of International Tropical Timber Organization and has represented Guyana internationally as several forums and workshops over the years. Mr. Singh.
Thank you very much for that warm introduction. Honorable Vikram Bharat, Minister of Natural Resources and Member of Parliament, His Excellency Greg Quinn, British High Commissioner to Guyana, His Excellency Fernando Pons Canto, Ambassador of the European Delegation to Guyana, Dr. Al Hassan Atta, Moderator of this event, Mr. Kenny David, Head of the FLECT Secretariat, distinguished presenters and invitees. Good morning and welcome to this virtual event on the European Union Forest Law Enforcement, Governance and Trade Voluntary Partnership Agreement entitled The Markets, Technologies and Communities, Lessons and Experiences for the Forest and Wood Product Sector. A special welcome to those from Guyana's forest sector, including sawmillers, exporters, timber traders, etc. Also, to our colleagues from government agencies in Guyana, including the Guyana Revenue Authority, Environmental Protection Agency, Geology and Mines Commission, Guyana Lands and Surveys Commission, and others. Also, representatives from civil society organizations in Guyana, including WWF, Conservation International, Amerindian People's Association, and others. We also welcome warmly delegates from government agencies in other countries implementing or negotiating a VPA. Some examples are Ghana, Congo, Liberia, Honduras. Also, participants from other countries interested in learning more about the forest sector and the VPA process in Guyana. In collaboration with our partners, the Guyana Forestry Commission is pleased to host this event, which is an important opportunity for Guyana to share experiences and lessons as the country is moving forward with VPA implementation. This is also a timely event since Guyana seeks to be as effective and efficient as possible and will learn from the experiences and the collective knowledge of the participants in this meeting. It is a special pleasure to have Dr. Al Hassan Atta join us from Ghana to moderate the opening special, especially since Dr. Atta was the FLECT facilitator in Guyana. And before I go, a short bio on Dr. Atta. He is a forest industry and trade specialist with over 30 years of technical experience. He has a strong international reputation in facilitating negotiation processes and high-level discourse through his roles as chairman of the Council and other committees of the International Tropical Timber Organization, and also with his work with the United Nations Forum on Forests. In his role as chair of Ghana's VPA Steering Committee, he gained recognition with both national and international stakeholders as a skilled facilitator and trusted convener of complex multi-stakeholder processes. His experience as a senior member of Government of Ghana's negotiation team also means that he has a detailed technical understanding of the complexity of the VPAs. Between 2014 and 2017, Dr. Arthur worked as the FLECT facilitator in Guyana. I now invite Dr. Arthur to take over the proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you for your kind words, Commissioner James Singh. Very much appreciated. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you may be. Honorable Vikram Bharat, Member of Parliament and Minister of Natural Resources of Guyana, His Excellency Greg Quinn, British High Commissioner to Guyana, His Excellency Fernando Pons-Canto, Ambassador of the European Union and Head of Delegation, Mr. James Singh, Kennedy David, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. Permit me, first and foremost, to show appreciation to the organizers for inviting me to moderate this morning's session. I feel honored to be part of this virtual event, myself being an advocate of experience sharing and lessons learning. I believe while I worked in Ghana as a FLEG facilitator, we did organize 2 such events. And I'm pleased to say this is continuing, particularly at this difficult time of COVID-19. When as foresters or in the forest sector, we need to be creative and perhaps leverage technology to our advantage. But technology that is relevant, technology that is appropriate, and we should be guided by the lessons of this morning. This session is in 2 segments. There is the first segment in which we'll hear statements from the 3 distinguished personalities, whom of course I'll shortly introduce. At the end of their statements, I'll provide a very brief summary and close the segment. Then we would hear from Mr. Kenny David in the second segment, which would open the technical sessions and also guide us in our discussions over the next 4 days. In terms of how I call the speakers, my preference is not to introduce them at once, but to introduce them as and when they speak. And on that basis, I have the pleasure to invite the first speaker, His Excellency Greg Quinn, the British High Commissioner. He was appointed High Commissioner to the Cooperative Republic of Guyana and non-resident ambassador to Suriname in 2015. Your Excellency Greg Quinn joined the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, now the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office in 1995 and has served in Tallinn, Accra, the city which I'm in now, Minsk, Basra, Baghdad, Washington, and Astana, now Nurul Sultan. He is a graduate of international politics and international history from the Aberystwyth University. He holds a master's degree in history from the Open University and an honorary doctorate in law from Queen's University, Belfast. I will now invite His Excellency Greg Quinn to take the floor. Greg Quinn, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Al Hassan. Good to see you again, albeit virtually. Hello, everyone. All protocols having been observed, let me say how much of a pleasure it is to be here today speaking to you virtually, something which none of us had done all but a few months ago. Now it is a way of life. I'm extremely pleased to see this virtual learning event take place. It covers important issues such as markets, timber traceability systems, community involvement in the forestry sector, and forest governance reforms. I commend all those involved in arranging this event for making it happen in these turbulent COVID times. The UK-Guyana partnership, especially on forest governance reform and the timber trade, has been long-standing and deep. It all started in the late 1990s, early 2000s, when we worked with the Guyana Forestry Commission to effectively fulfill its mandate to promote sustainable, ecologically sound and socially integrated forest management systems. This laid a strong foundation for our support beginning in 2012 to the Forest Law Enforcement, Governance and Trade, the FLEGT Action Plan, the EU's response to the challenge of illegal logging and deforestation. Our support, including with our friends from the EU and Norway, has helped improve transparency and stakeholder relations, as well as clarifying legal and administrative requirements applicable to the forestry sector. The conclusion of negotiations on the voluntary partnership agreement has been a major step forward in combating illegal logging, in improving forest governance, in respecting indigenous rights, and in promoting a legal and sustainable timber trade. These are all vital for Guyana's access to international timber markets. And we are proud of the UK's role in this through making funds available up to about $4.7 million to support stakeholders in contributing to the national dialogue that shaped that VPA. VPAs are bilateral trade agreements that commit the EU and partner countries to ensure that all forest product supply chains provide independently verified evidence of full legal compliance through a process of flagged licensing. With Brexit, the UK will leave the EU, but it remains committed to the VPAs, as our experience has shown the importance of supporting processes through which countries negotiate and implement such bilateral trade deals. Therefore, we will continue to support Guyana as it implements the agreement. Through the Forest Governance, Markets and Climate Programme of my home office, the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, the UK is supporting the implementation of the agreement with more than $2.6 million up until the end of 2022. The UK has also regulated its own wood sector to make sure that only products that are produced in accordance with local laws can be traded on the UK market. The UK timber trade regulation is based on the EU timber regulation and will provide a green lane for Guyana's flagged licensed timber onto the UK market. As you know, the UK will be co-hosting the next Climate COP conference next year. Major emphasis at that event will be on nature, as climate change can only be solved through restoring and protecting nature, and in particular forests. Guyana has been a good custodian of its forest resources over many decades. In 1989, Guyana, under then President Desmond Hoyt, made a visionary offer to the international community at the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. Guyana dedicated its Irukama forests to the purpose of conservation and experimental research into sustainable utilisation. Since 1996, Iroquois has been a unique reserve of 371,000 hectares of rainforest. More recently, various governments have committed to a green development pathway through various strategies. And indeed, in the last few days, the government here reconfirmed the low carbon development strategy, a strategy that guides Guyana's economic and socio-cultural development using a green growth plan. We encourage the Guyana government to further pursue this and to submit an enhanced nationally determined contribution for COP26 with ambitious long-term strategies committing to further cutting or offsetting of carbon emissions by 2030. Also, in the light of recovery from the worldwide COVID pandemic, we will have the chance to build back better and build back greener, making environmental sustainability and resilience the basis for recovery. Ladies and gentlemen, forestry has been an issue I have been involved in since I arrived in Georgetown in February of 2015. I have had the privilege of working with the Ministry of Natural Resources and the Guyana Forestry Commission over that time. On behalf of the UK, I have been able to donate resources to them, including vehicles for the GFC and more recently laptops and other materials to allow the GFC to continue their work in these difficult times. There have also been less comfortable moments. This includes discussions I have had over the import of greenheart into Guyana or into the UK, including a public forum such as the Guyana Manufacturers and Services Association annual awards ceremony. That has allowed me to address some of the concerns expressed. I am sorry that we have still not gotten a full resolution to this matter, but it is something I know we are all working together on. Ladies and gentlemen, ultimately, I would like to think the work we are doing through FLEGT and the VPA will ensure Guyana is able to market sustainable and legally harvested timber in the markets which are eager to have it, including the UK. On that note, let me conclude by wishing you well in your training over the next few days. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. May I now call the second speaker, His Excellency Fernando Pons Canto. He represents the European Union in Guyana, Suriname, and is also responsible for 7 overseas countries and territories. He holds a degree in political science, a PhD in international peace and security. The ambassador has served within the European Union since 1995, and before taking up this post, he acted as the deputy head of division for EU, Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean relations at the European External Action Service based in Brussels. At the European Union institutions, the ambassador has worked across many regions, including North America, Eastern Europe, Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean. Prior to joining the European Union institutions, the ambassador worked in the private sector, and this has enabled him to bring a broad perspective and diverse range of experiences to his current occupation. I now invite Ambassador Canto to take the floor. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Alassane. Honorable Minister Vikram Bharat, distinguished guests and friends, all protocols having been established, I would like to start by thanking you for organizing this important event, which I'm sure will contribute a lot to develop the thinking and the expertise in this very important area. I would like to speak today mostly about the FLEGT, the Forestry Law Enforcement, Governance and Trade scheme that, and I would like to start by underlining that this is an extremely important European scheme, and it should lead to an extremely useful agreement between the European Union and Guyana. I have had the privilege and the pleasure to be involved in the FLEGT in other countries. And I think that Alassane or one of the previous speakers mentioned the case of Liberia, the case of Honduras. And indeed, I think that it is very important that we all can exchange good practices from the past and to learn from the things that have been done well, but also from the things that perhaps could have done better in Liberia, in Honduras, and in other countries. I mentioned those two because I had also the pleasure to work on those two countries. And I remember in particular the FLEGT negotiations and the process in Honduras, which was extremely interesting, but also as a source of learning for the future. I also had the privilege and the pleasure to witness the signature in Brussels of the voluntary partnership agreement, the initialization of the VPA in Brussels, which I think was in November 2018. And at that time, the participants were extremely hopeful that we could go ahead quickly for the benefit of Guyana and for the benefit of the European Union. However, as you know, after that happy moment, there came a time of, should I say, political turmoil, which now is past, thankfully, but which has, let us admit it, delayed the process, at least on the political side. I am happy to say that throughout this difficult period, however, technical work continued, and actually it led to some important achievements on which it is now important to build. I would also like to note that throughout this period, several sections of the GIF already benefited from substantial financial and technical support through several instruments, including the EU-funded FAO EU FLEGT facility. But it is now very important that also the process of signature and ratification, subsequent ratification by both parliaments can advance as quickly as possible. And in order to do so, there are several steps which is important to take. They go from the legal scrubbing of the text to the meeting of the different governance institutions of the FLEGT, the Joint Review and Monitoring Committee, and also we will have some formal gatherings, of course, under the chairmanship of the Honorable Minister of Natural Resources and myself, to endorse, among others, the JIF, and we would like to organize that and to have that as soon as possible, to have that completed as soon as possible. This scheme is a forest governance scheme, first of all. And in that sense, I can echo the words of previous speakers and to underline as well that the preservation of natural resources and the good governance of forests is one of the top environmental priorities of the European Union. And this is why we put so much effort and also so much funding into this kind of agreement. Guyana has now the opportunity to be one of the pioneer countries in this type of agreements, which are not so numerous yet. We have a few, but let's say that I am very hopeful that Guyana will complete the process now more rapidly, Guyana and the European Union, that we will be able to advance together without any delay, and that sooner than later, we will have this agreement in place. Guyana, this country that we all love so much, will be able to export their timber products of top quality to the European Union with full confidence that they are fully certified and managed in a way that protects this wonderful resource. But I want to conclude underlining something which is also very important. The FLEGT is a forest governance agreement, but it is also an enforcement agreement in the sense that it aims at ensuring that the legislation is properly enforced, and it is basically, and it is its fundamental nature, a trade agreement that we are managing, but that it is actually first and foremost about enabling trade between Guyana and the European Union, between the European Union and Guyana. That's why I'm so happy to be here. Once again, thank you very much for organizing this important event. I wish you lots of useful reflection, and I look forward to hear from the result of your training and of your reflections today and in the next few days. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Canto. Let me now turn to our third and last speaker for this session. And he is Honorable Vikram Bharat, Member of Parliament and also Minister of Natural Resources of Guyana. Honorable Vikram Bharat is qualified in the field of computer science and public management with a wealth of experience in governance and managerial competencies. Prior to his appointment as Minister of Natural Resources, he has been an educator, a mentor, an entrepreneur for over 15 years. He currently has oversight of the Guyana Geology and Mines Commission, the Guyana Forestry Commission, the Guyana Gold Board, and the Department of Energy. Very high profile position and very tasking position. Honorable Vikram Bharat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Atul, for those kind words of introduction. Indeed, it's a challenging but important ministry. Excellency, Quinn, British High Commission to Guyana. Excellency, Pons Canto, Ambassador to the European Union, Delegation to Guyana. Forest industry stakeholders, Mrs. Singh and staff of the Guyana Forestry Commission, participants, ladies and gentlemen, I bring you greetings on behalf of His Excellency, Dr. Mohamed Irfan Ali, and the Government of Guyana. The Ministry of Natural Resources welcomes you to this forum on the markets, technologies, and communities, lessons and experiences for the forest and wood product sector. A virtual event on the Guyana-European Union Forest Law Enforcement, Governance, and Trade Voluntary Partnership Agreement, VPA. We express gratitude to the European Union, World Resources Institute, the European Forest Institute Technical Assistance Project, the Government of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and North Ireland, acting through the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office and the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations European Union FLEGT program for making this event a reality. Through your support, Guyana has mobilized the requisite resources and technology to provide a virtual space for this dialogue. After several years in the negotiation phase, Guyana is on the road to achieving another major milestone in this VPA process, entering the formal implementation phase of its VPA with the European Union. As we are aware, this VPA is a key component of the FLEGT Action Plan that uniquely combines trade levers, and governance reforms. Its multi-stakeholder approach to negotiation and implementation improves coordination among government ministries and agencies, further building the capacity of our government, local businesses, and other stakeholders whose roles are critical in the sustainable forestry management and the legal timber trade. We therefore recognize that the VPA offers significant benefits to Guyana, which go beyond addressing illegal logging and trade issues, helping us to maintain and even improve our international reputation as a responsible forest nation through appropriate strategies and measures, while also addressing development and environmental issues. What is also central to the success of the VPA is the exchange of information and experiences between Guyana and other VPA countries, as well as tropical timber producers and buyers. This type of knowledge enhances the capacity of our forest sector stakeholders to better understand the dynamics of national and global markets and to assist them to better meet the needs of these. Further, the lessons and experiences of other VPA countries also help to create synergies between our interests and goals through the exchange of valuable information and can likely improve our success. Lessons learned will also contribute to the Ministry of Natural Resources and the Guyana Forestry Commission's efforts to enhance the development of Guyana's forest product, especially in the value-added aspects. I take this opportunity to reiterate Guyana's commitment to the many international treaties and it has voluntarily signed on to, and to emphasize that even though we are developing a nation with limited resources, Guyana is making every effort to meet its obligations. Guyana is grateful to the many like-minded partners who have provided tangible support in these initiatives, and the government of Guyana remains dedicated to the successful and timely implementation of the VPA. We are confident that through this event and similar initiatives, we will further strengthen our already robust, sustainable forest management systems and continue to empower and improve the livelihoods and sustainability of our forest communities. In closing, I express gratitude for your participation in and support of this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister for Natural Resources. Very much appreciated. And I think we've come to the end of the first segment. And I'm not sure how much time we have, but I'll try to highlight a few key messages from the three statements. It appears when the High Commissioner spoke, he clearly indicated the support that have been provided by the European Union, Norway, and the UK to Guyana in improving its forest and governance over the years, and for making the required change. Quite clearly, I'm sure when we hear the next speaker, Mr. Kenny David, on terms of the updates and the status of the forest sector in Guyana, we would see how much work has gone on through the support of these countries. But it's warming to hear the UK recognize that the support they provided is providing some level of impact to the forestry sector. Then the issue of the flag VPA remains a major step to improving forest governance and promoting trade in legal timber. And I think all the three speakers actually did highlight that. And I think for me, the theme for this session only highlights the fact that with the flag VPA, we can move in that direction where we begin to look at markets and market access. And hopefully through that process, we can improve on forest governance and also promote trade in legal and sustainable sources. one thing which I also heard from the ambassador to the European Union was the issue of the EU Guyana joint implementation framework. Clearly, there's work to be done. Clearly, the plan lays out what Guyana will do over the next 5 years, but then it needs to be formalized in terms of how it is taken forward. And I was happy to observe that the ambassador aware that this has been taken forward and has put it across. Then there's the issue of markets, which I think are especially important. And again, clearly, all the three speakers mentioned the need for market access. And then I think this platform we have now, in terms of sharing of experiences, for all the three speakers, clearly, it was quite clear that strengthening the platform for sharing experiences would be appropriate going forward. And therefore, perhaps something countries or partner countries could do to ensure that as much as possible, they can begin to share their experiences. And particularly, if I may suggest, persons who are flag heads in the different partner countries can begin to form some kind of network where periodically they exchange information and share difficulties and discuss issues to see how to take the forest sector forward. The other point I noted was the issue of going through the process to ratification, and perhaps that is something that the partners would take forward in the coming months. It's difficult times, but clearly through these virtual events, we're shown the way forward in terms of addressing difficulties or challenges that will come because we cannot have physical meetings. So on that note, I would ask persons to kindly join me in thanking the three speakers, the Minister of Natural Resources, Honorable Vikram Bharat, the Ambassador of the European Union to Guyana, Ambassador Kanto, and the British High Commissioner, His Excellency Quinn. Thank you very much for your time. And on that note, I bring this session to a close.
Thank you.
If I may now reopen the session, that if I may go to the second technical segment, in which Mr. Kenny David would provide an overview of the forest sector in Guyana and also inform us on the progress made to date in the implementation of the EU-Guyana VPA. Mr. Kenny David holds a Bachelor's of Science degree in Environmental Science from the University of Guyana and a Master's degree in Natural Resource Management from the University of West Indies. He has been employed by the Ghana Forestry Commission since 2006. And during this period, Mr. David has worked in areas such as forest monitoring, licensing, industry development, export and import of forest produce. Mr. David has also been heading the Forest Products Development and Marketing Council and the Flex Secretariat. And the Flex Secretariat, he's been there since 2012. Mr. David therefore brings a decade of experience working in the forest sector with various stakeholders at both local and international levels. And he firmly believes that forests are so much more than just trees. That's interesting. So if I may now invite Mr. Kenny David. But since this is my last intervention, let me take the opportunity to thank the persons who have worked behind the scenes to make this event possible. I appreciate very much having asked me to moderate this session. And Mr. Kenny David, after his presentation, would introduce the next moderator, Again, thank you very much for your attention. Mr. David, you now have the floor.
Good morning all. I trust you can hear me. Thank you very much, Dr. Atta. I think it's an honor to be here, to be able to speak, provide an update on the VPA in country, a process that has been ongoing for some time. And I think, there's still so much more that we have to do. And so experiences like this, or events like this, I think are going to be quite useful in allowing us to continue that discussion that needs to happen. And Dr. Atta, it is an honor to be able to at least, have a chance to work with you again in this fashion. I'd like to just maybe just share my screen for a little bit. Yes, just maybe to provide some brief update. I think a lot of what I want to share has already been mentioned by many of the presenters before me. But essentially, maybe just a brief overview. The FLECT and the FLECT action plan birthed in the EU in 2003, and voluntary partnership agreement was one of those initiatives, or part of that larger initiative, that timber producing countries would work with the European Union to develop systems, strategies, guidelines to ensure that timber that was coming from that timber producing country and going to the European Union would have met some sort of a standard or some sort of check to ensure that it is legal and legally produced. The VPA, therefore, we talk about timber legality assurance systems. And so Guyana, of course, as you may know, Guyana has been involved with this VPA process since 2012. And of course, an initialing of the agreement happening in November of 2018. So we have been in this process for some time. And for that reason, I'd like to thank all of you that are actually here and the stakeholders. I know some of you, I've seen some names. I know many of you have been here with us for those many years. And I think it's wonderful that you're still here. And certainly the discussion needs to continue. But I think, in fact, we are one of the first countries in the region to have initialed the VP agreement. Some may wonder, I think, why these processes take as long as they do. But I think we can appreciate that as diverse as they are, and the stakeholders are quite diverse as well. But again, to come to to have an agreement that I think is able to benefit all stakeholders as much as possible, it takes time. You need to have and to hear from all those stakeholders in a way that allows for you to be to be able to develop an agreement that everybody can be proud of. And so that's why I think events like these are also quite useful, because it offers us a space. I think it's very new to us, certainly to myself and those of us at the Forestry Commission. But I think it really gives us a space to be able to continue in this discussion. The benefits of the VPA, I think, have already been touched on. So maybe briefly, and I think for us, while reducing illegal logging or limiting illegal logging is sort of the high point of VPAs, for us as well, as a country, it was also about preventing unfair competition, illegal and illegal products. It's about ensuring that benefits flows to the right people. And of course, you also know that we have a lot of forest dependent communities, and so to ensure that they are also very involved in this process, and that their voice is also heard. We've heard a lot about forest governance, and I think the VPA, the G in FLECT, that governance aspect is quite important. As we talk about management and decision making and resources being used in the best possible way. And I think we would all agree that, when you have people that are using the resources and are interacting with it in a sense on a daily, regular basis, you really need to, to allow them to have a space where they can share their views. Again, and I know we all agree with this statement that it is really those that are using it every day, living in a sense in the forest, are the ones who are best positioned, I think, to let us know how to manage it quite well. One of the points I think also mentioned, and I think it's quite useful in terms of the VPA and for Guyana as well, is the legislative and policy reform. And I think it is not, in many cases, it is not that your laws are necessarily weak. But I think, as as things change, and we see so much has changed even with the COVID and situation. So much has changed, and I think what VPA has done is allowed us to have a discussion as it relates to updating our laws and our that govern what happens in country. And I think that is a discussion that needs to happen, because again, and of course, updating them is not to make it harsher for the stakeholder, but rather it is to improve what happens in countries, so that it is done in a more effective and efficient manner. Civil society, I think, also is very involved in this VP and has been involved since 2012. And that participation, I think, has allowed us to come up with an agreement that I think captures their views in a way that allows for it being, for us achieving that agreement within the fastest possible time. Of course, product quality is also one of the reasons that Guyana, and I think many of our stakeholders are also very interested in this particular aspect. When we started the discussion, the VPA, we were keen to mention and to capture an agreement as well that some effort needs to be put into improving the product or the products that Guyana is bringing to the market. And so, as we continue to implement the VPA, you will see that we are also not just looking at bringing any product to the market, we're really improving the quality of what we bring into the market. So over the last, as I said before, we having initialed that agreement in 2018, when we moved into the implementation period, we looked at designing and developing an implementation framework, and you will hear a little more about this as we go over the next 4 days. We looked at developing a framework that would capture the activities that needed to happen. And so early 2019. We started looking at, and had some of you, as I said, would have been involved in that discussion, and had a very interesting group of stakeholders, as diverse as possible, develop a plan of action or activities that would allow us to be able to achieve FLEC licensing within again, the shortest possible time. This event, and I know we've talked about markets, technologies, community, which is really the focus, but again, 3 areas that we believe to be very critical in the VPA discussion. We have to understand the markets. We have to understand what is happening. How does our products fit into the market? How do we improve and add value to the products that we are bringing to the market? I think we also need to understand, and someone already cautioned, I think Dr. Atta talked about technologies, its role, and we've seen that technology can play a very significant role, but we have to be cautious and careful. And so we're eager to learn from other countries. What are they doing? How is it the average stakeholder or the man on the ground, and that's what role can he play in ensuring technologies and its use is realized in a manner that he benefits and there's not too much trouble in that sense for him to fit in. And of course, communities, a large percentage of the produce that comes to the marketplace in the Guyana setting comes from communities and community forests and community groups that are involved at the community level. And so hearing their voice and sharing, learning from other countries as well, I think is critical. As I said, in the interest of time, I'll be quick. I think the presentations will be shared with you, but I think this graph captures nicely some of the main activities that we have been involved in from 2012 up until the present. Maybe just to touch on maybe the last two bits there, last 2 years, 2018, 2019, the establishment of a national implementation working group. And just allow me to mention that group is quite diverse in nature, a multi-stakeholder group, but I think it really captures the stakeholders. The way it was designed is to allow for the voices of stakeholders to be brought to a common table in a way that we can discuss issues and come up with real workable solutions and be able to advance the VPA. In 2019, and even now, we continue with the legal scrubbing, which is essentially going through the VP agreement to ensure that legally it is sound and solid. We have, as I said, developed the joint implementation framework. One of the things we've struggled a little bit with, if I may say so, or have had challenges like everybody else, is because of of course, in the face of COVID, and of course, we had some political unrest, as we say, but it has made that face-to-face consultation and connection that we're so accustomed to, it's made it extremely difficult. And nonetheless, we've been exploring other avenues to be able to reach out to our stakeholders. In 2020, we were still able to design and develop a communication strategy which will be finalized in the coming weeks. And again, I think what its design was multi-stakeholder in nature. A number of various groups, civil society, private sector, government was involved in development and design of this document. And I think what it will allow is, as we continue to communicate in the VP, and as you know, communication is critical, but to do it in a manner that meets the needs of the stakeholders. And I think you would agree that every one of you that is even listening right now, will understand that, we would communicate with each of you very differently, but it is still important that we communicate. And so I think the strategy captures in a very detailed way, and of course that will be made public once it's finalized, how we speak to the various stakeholders. Legal scrubbing continues, as I said, in a matter of weeks. We should be complete with that. One of the key points that we just want to take away from this slide is really the gaps. We did a gap assessment, we looked at our needs assessment rather, and we looked at some of the gaps that existed, or exist within the current system, within the agencies that are involved in the VP implementation. And so one of the things is that we were trying to ensure that once having identified those gaps, you can be able to put systems in place to fill those gaps. There's still a lot of work that is to be done. The Joint Monitoring and Review Committee that you have heard would have mentioned is really that sort of political body that oversees all of this. It's really between the Guyana and the EU. That group will meet, in fact, in December for the first time. And of course, ratifying an agreement, or ratification of the agreement rather, still hasn't happened. But once that happens, it is then officially that you get into the implementation period. So you may hear us talk about pre-implementation, but that's because the agreement hasn't been ratified just yet. Maybe just a last point to highlight on this slide in terms of, I know while FLECT licensing is the goal in that sense, I want to really help us to understand that there are a number of things that will happen before we get to FLECT licensing. And that's why I captured it as a milestone. But I think each of them will be in their own way success stories. So, for example, the way we capture data and transfer data in country from forest stations, from you, the stakeholders, it can be improved. And so we're working to develop a system that allows for data capture and transfer to happen in a more efficient manner. So you don't necessarily have to leave where you are and come to the city to have information brought, to be received, but rather systems are in place at the stations, your own devices that you use to allow us to capture that more efficiently. Transparency and transparency mechanisms, I think, is also quite key. And so we're working on how do we provide more information to stakeholders in a way and using a medium that you can. I know there's always been a call for, we don't have access to this information or that information. And so we're actually developing systems to allow you to access more information on forest, stakeholders, so much more, licenses, concessions, so that you have more information at your fingertips to be able to make more informed decisions. That is also, so again, I think even as we move towards FLECT licensing, there are certain milestones that we will try to hit, and we can celebrate together in a sense. Of course, greater collaboration. As you know, maybe my last point, as you know, there are 16 other agencies that are involved in this VPA, and it's not an easy task trying to get 16 agencies to work together. But we've managed to do it, I think, quite successfully under the negotiation phase. And while this phase will require a lot more sort of hands-on work, we are very, very excited, and I think we will be able to manage, for those 60 agencies to continue to give us the support that is necessary to see the VPA become a reality. Thank you. I know I've been a bit brief there, but again, just to give a very brief snapshot of where the VPA is, and where we would like to go over the next 4 days, and how are you going to be involved. Maybe just to encourage those of us that are listening, while it is virtual, your voices or maybe your fingertips can still be heard or felt. So I would really encourage you, let us hear from you. We want to hear from you. While the VPA is very broad on a number of areas that that can be discussed. This event is very focused, but I think it is critical that we hear from you and share your views with us. And as best as possible, whatever questions and concerns you may have, we can try to respond to those as well in a very timely manner, so that together at the end, as we say, we don't want to just have a conversation where we leave and everybody says, yes, we had a good 4 days of meeting, but rather what is the tangible takeaway that allows Guyana and you, the stakeholders, to advance this VPA process so that we can get the FEC licenses. On that note, I'd like to thank you very much for your time. And I'd like to introduce the speaker for the next, for the first session on markets. And that is to be Vanessa Ben, who will be our moderator. Miss Ben, very good friend of mine. She may not say that to you if you meet her face to face, but I'd like to think we're very good friends. Miss Ben has had over 25 years of experience in the agriculture and environment sectors. She works with the Iroquois International Center for Rainforest Conservation and Development, and she also represents the environmental NGOs, which is Conservation International and the World Wildlife Fund, and Iroquois, of course, on the National Implementation Working Group of the VPA. Of course, Vanessa is also an independent auditor for the Forest Management and Chain of Custody Certification System of the Forest Stewardship Council. So allow me please join with me rather in giving a very warm welcome to Miss Vanessa Ben. Miss Ben, the floor to you.
Good morning, everyone. I am very pleased to commence this session, which precedes the distinguished opening panel of policymakers, trade and development partners who have just set the stage for us to dive deeper into this conversation about markets, technologies and communities in the context of the forest and wood product sector in Guyana. And now this first session on global market trends will provide an overview of Guyana's forest sector, its main markets and trends, and developments in the global timber trade, including challenges and opportunities for Guyana's timber exports, including the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on trade flows and the demand for forest products. Our speakers on this panel will be Fabian Jones of the Guyana Forestry Commission and Mr. Rupert Oliver, who is a FLECT Independent Market Monitor. I will introduce them both and I will hand over the panel to them so that when Fabian completes his presentation, he will be immediately followed by Mr. Oliver. I thank you all for joining our session and for staying on board, and I hope that you continue to hear me clearly. So Fabian Jones of the Guyana Forestry Commission will provide us an overview of the forest sector in Guyana and provide an update on the timber trade, including the key markets, products, and potential export markets of interest. Rupert Oliver of the ITTO will then provide an update on global market trends in the timber trade, focusing on the main export markets for timber from Guyana. His presentation will touch on the impact, those existing and those projected, of the COVID-19 pandemic on the global timber trade. May I introduce them though individually and let you know that Fabian Jones is actually an economist statistician at the Guyana Forestry Commission. He has been working in this role over the past 10 years. In this capacity, he is responsible for the coordination of all economic analyses on the forest sector and to disseminate this forest sector information to the relevant agencies. Rupert Oliver has over 25 years experience working in the international timber trade and industry. He is regularly consulted by international and national agencies on the timber market developments. He has written extensively on hardwood markets and forest management issues for a wide range of European trade and industry journals. He is the European correspondent for the ITTO and the International Timber Trade Organization's Market Information Service and trade analyst for the FLECT Independent Market Monitor. which is a major EU-funded project hosted by the ITTO and which has been ongoing since 2014 in assessing the market impact of the EU FLECT VPA process. It gives me great pleasure right now to hand over to Mr. Fabian Jones of the Guyana Forestry Commission. Over to you, Fabian. Thank you.
Hey, morning everyone. Thank you, Vanessa, for that introduction. This morning, with all protocol being observed, I'm happy to be here and being given the opportunity to share my presentation with you. My presentation will focus on the overview of the forestry sector in Guyana. I will talk a bit on timber trade, export markets, some of the products, and the potentials of the forestry sector in Guyana, using the outline here. But before I go into the first sector in Guyana, I want to share with you an overview of what what forestry from a global perspective. As of 2018, forest contribution to global GDP was estimated to be about 2% and about 3% of international merchandise trade. Also, global forestry turnover, which consists of products such as logs, sawnwood, roundwood, and other value-added products, exceeded about 200 million US dollars. And also, and further, forestry has been responsible for an annual, employing annually about 12.7 million people around the world. And I would now bring it down a bit now to Guyana. And I want to start by talking about our strengths. I want to share with you that what I think are some strengths and weaknesses of the forest sector in Guyana. Guyana is home to a large quantity of prime and lesser used species. Prime species being, and I'm talking about the common name that we use in Guyana, such as green heart, purple heart, moro, kabakali, and the lesser used species to the common name of hububali, lemon mubali, etc. Species are of high density and high durability, which can be used for a wide range of structural applications with little to no treatment. The sector has the ability to take advantage of a lot of markets, secured markets within the Caribbean. And there's also the opportunity because of proximity to the Latin American and other Caribbean markets. The sector boasts an exemplary record of very low deforestation rate and a global leader in low carbon development. We have an exemplary record at forest legality standards. However, with strengths, there's also challenges. And the industry sees itself essentially as a primary producing entity, low value actually, of things such as logs, dress and undressed sawn lumber. This, I believe, is a major weakness because it effectively makes the industry a price taker rather than being able to dictate its price as other high countries who have a more developed sector. Most of the companies in the sector do not meet global quality standards. And we talk about the limited ability to produce or to meet global quality standards. Most of the companies. So we often find it hard to meet some international terms such as aesthetics, functionality, and structural integrity. And also, due to the reluctance of the industry to invest, I believe, in human resource development, or sometimes we have a low level of managerial and technical skills. And also because we are primary producers, we fall into the category of we produce at a very high cost. But in going and talking about, I want to share a bit on the overview of the sector. GFC has made significant effort to carry out the mandates of the sector, which is prescribed in the Forest Act of 2009 and the Forest Commission Act of 2007. This is against the backdrop of reduced performance during 2019, and coupled with the global pandemic of COVID-19. The forest sector in Guyana has been able to employ just over 20,000 persons annually. The forest sector has contributed on an average between 36 to 45 million US dollars annually over the past 5 years. And however, and about 400 to 500 million meter cube of wood on an annual basis. However, the sector continues to suffer from a decline in GDP because of factors that is independent of the Forestry Commission. You can see from our GDP contribution on this table, you'll see a declining forest sector GDP contribution. We are now down as of 2019. Forest sector contribution was at 1.42%. With respect to land allocation, total state forest is approximately 12.5 million hectares. As of December 29, total allocated land accounts for just over 5 million hectares, and with just over 7.5 million hectares of unallocated land remaining. We can see from this table the disbursement of forest allocated land. Forest sector performance is based on what we cut, what we export. The sector cuts logs, roundwood, which is normally piles, poles, and posts, primary lumber, split wood, which shingles and staves fall into this category, and fuel wood, as you know, charcoal and firewood would fall into this category. The forest sector is able to produce these things at a very comfortable, but however, at a primary stage. Timber production centered on the production of logs, roundwood, and sawnwood, with the highest production of logs being recorded in 2015, as you see, 331,000 meter cube. Primary export has ranged between just about US 35, as you might see, 35 million to US 42 million. Timber production centered on logs. The lowest, as you might see, for 2020, our lowest production seems to not be on par, not even with 2019. And we can see how these three products, with logs, roundwood, and sawnwood, how they have been their production trend. With respect to timber trade, timber exports are primarily based on timber and plywood products, and to a lesser extent, the export of value-added products. Primary export has ranged between, as I mentioned before, $35 to $42 million annually over the past 5 years. And added value products would fall into the line of between 5 to 8 million US, as you would see. The highest value product has always been sawnwood. However, you might, from the table, you can see that 2015 had a one-off where in log export revenue was higher more than the years that followed. However, there's a constant sawnwood export, which makes it the highest value added product. With respect to key markets, I want to talk about some markets, the markets of the forestry sector, which originally Guyana forest product has been exported to Africa, Asia, Europe, South America, Latin America, and the Caribbean. The Asia Pacific accounts for the largest market share of Guyana forest products, followed by the Latin America and the Caribbean region. Within these regions, they are the destination markets to which these products go. In Africa, the main markets are usually in no particular order: South Africa and United Republic of Tanzania. In Europe, there is usually Belgium, the Netherlands, and the UK. These are all large markets. In Latin America has a wide range of markets. To pinpoint the larger one would be Barbados, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, and St. Lucia also. Within North America, Mexico and the United States remain the two large markets, and in South America, French Guyana and Suriname. As I would have mentioned before, forestry exports are exported along these three categories: timber and plywood products, other value-added products, and non-timber forest products. The Asia-Pacific region for logs. These two graphs showed one with logs and the other of roundwood export. For logs, the Asia-Pacific has been and continues to be the main regional market for Guyana logs. However, smaller markets has been observed, particularly in North America. For roundwood, which comprise of piles, poles, and posts, North America has and continues to be the main market. What was observed is with logs, other market has emerged. As with logs, other market has emerged in the Latin American and the Caribbean region, as depicted here, particularly for piles. The export of piles to the EU market has and always been on the increase. Sawnwood export has shared across all the main regional destinations over the past 5 years. The smallest market is within South America. Well, the largest market is within South America, pardon me. Latin America will be like the main hub for sawn lumber coming from Guyana. The Latin American region has been the main market for Guyana value-added products, particularly territories such as Barbados, Trinidad, as I would have mentioned before, Antigua, Barbuda, and Jamaica. We do see some very small emerging markets coming up in North America and in South America. And we are hoping to tap in the markets for these value-added products in the Asia Pacific. I'm going to mention later on in my presentation, and in markets in Europe. With respect to opportunities, Canada and CARICOM Free Trade Agreement creates opportunities for increased market access in Canada for Guyanese forest products. I must mention that there is a flip side to this agreement, where Canada wood products, particularly pine, can enter the Guyanese market duty-free. Because we can boast the uniqueness of our tropical hardwood. Because of the density and the uniqueness of prime wood species, there are potential for Guyanese wood being substituted for lower quality wood that is being used in industries like in Taiwan, Republic of Korea, Thailand, and Vietnam. This is an advantage, I believe, because it means that the industry has on top downstream value-added potential, which can capitalize on, which can be capitalized on, and to develop the sector further. And I also mentioned here, being at the lower end of the value-added spectrum can create opportunity. It is also an advantage where we can learn from, because of our downstream value-added potential, we're able to capitalize on what has been developed before. We also has the advantage of learning from our competitor countries who have industrialized forestry sector, who have an industrialized forestry sector and product sector, and we can learn from their mistakes. We don't want to take it as reinventing the wheel, but we can see their technology and leapfrog to these standards, which would have been tried before. Respect to potential markets, the opportunity for sawn lumber, as I would have mentioned before, to markets such as Thailand, Vietnam, Philippines, China, and Taiwan. Coupled with the opportunity to export sawn lumber also to Asia, China. There's also the opportunity to supply non-timber forest products to the Asian market. As you see, there's no market for non-timber forest product in Asia. And there's the opportunity to supply products to the Middle East, which I believe is an untapped market for Guyana forestry sector. And I want to close now by talking what is next for Guyana. And I want to reiterate that these are some of the prospects that I believe that our sector is the direction that our sector is going, which is we hoping to broaden base of small and medium scale operators and focus a lot on local communities. We are hoping to expand and add value, the add value component. We also utilize a broader range of timber species, focusing more on less used species, and build regional market potential because of our proximity and because of the uniqueness of our product. And we can also improve on the quality and the standards and build capacity and the code of practice for processing. This is all. This has brought me to the end of my presentation. I thank you for listening.
Good morning. It really is a great pleasure to be speaking to you. I'm the trade analyst for the FLEGT VPA Independent Market Monitoring Project. Just a little bit of background for those who might not be familiar with the IMM project. It's a project which actually is mandated by the FLEGT Voluntary Partnership Agreements. It's mentioned, for example, in the Indonesian VPA and is seen as a way of demonstrating the market value of the FLEGT process and exploring exactly what the market impacts are. The project is funded by the European Commission, DG DevCo. It's managed through the International Tropical Timber Organization. And originally the project was started in 2014. It was originally due to run for 5 years to end in 2019, but it was recently extended until the end of 2022. Its objectives are to independently monitor FLEGT VPA market impacts. It also is designed to improve understanding of the impacts on timber prices, on trade and market trends globally, and also to contribute to monitoring the impacts of the broader FLEGT action plan. There's a lot of information on this particular project at our website. The address is there at the bottom. I would just say that there's a lot of data on there. There are a lot of reports. We do special studies on the impacts on specific market segments. We do regular annual trade surveys. We produce an annual report. Our newest annual report for last year, 2019, will be put on the website probably within the next 2 or 3 weeks. I just wanted to comment a little bit on where the data I show here comes from. A lot of it is actually part of the IMM dashboard. We have a statistical dashboard on the website. There's the address of that dashboard there. The IMM project description and its reporting framework requires us to collect statistics on the flag tea timber trade to the EU. So we do focus very much on that specific trade flow on flag tea timber trade to the EU, but we also look at wider trends. We look at how the flag tea licenses are interacting with other forms of verification, of legal verification, also looking at how it's impacting on very specific market sectors, and how the market for tropical timbers is interacting with demand for temperate wood from other parts of the world. And also, while we focus on the EU, we also do look quite closely at how other markets for wood products are developing around the world, what their demands are for legality verification, how large those markets are, what are the longer term trends. So we do, obviously, with this year particularly, we are taking quite a careful look at how COVID-19 might be impacting on the longer term market trend. I won't go into detail as to the scope of the dashboard. It's there. You can see it at that address. It's fairly straightforward to use, and there is a detailed detailed description of how to use the dashboard on the website. The source of data for that website is a thing called the Sustainable Timber Information Exchange. This is something that is a joint project between the Global Timber Forum and the ITTO, and this is bringing together data, monthly data, for 46 reporting countries around the world, mainly industrialized countries and some of the larger developing countries around the world. It covers about 90% of the global forest products trade. It provides data to the highest HS resolution, and it is updated monthly, and all that data is available for free. Again, it can be downloaded relatively easily. There's a detailed technical description of how to do that at the website. That's at www.stix.global. One thing I would say about this database is there are significant gaps in it. For example, it doesn't provide a lot of data on the countries in the Caribbean region. So some of the data I show you, which is taken from the STIX database, is highlighting some of the major trade flows out of Guyana, but it does omit trade flows in the Caribbean region. So it's not all encompassing, but it does give you some idea of the trends. Now, what I want to do first is just give you a brief overview of the global tropical trade, how it's changed in accordance with by the VPA status. What is the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the global trade? Well, this slide here shows how global trade has changed. This is covering all tropical wood products and wood furniture products in those two HS chapters, chapter 44 and 94, by VPA status between 2015 and 2019. The trade actually dipped in 2016. There was a big speculative boom in tropical hardwood trade in 2014 due to the rosewood trade boom with China. That boom came to an end in 2015, and trade did decline down into 2016. But then after that, trade has been rebounding between 2016 and 2018. In 2019, the total value of global trade increased, but only slightly, by 0.2% to $41.7 billion US dollars in 2019. And we are projecting, based on the data that we have, the monthly data that we have on global trade, we're projecting that to decline about 10% to $37.7 billion in 2020. One of the key things that you can see from this particular chart is that there is an increased role overall for countries which have signed a VPA partner agreement with the EU in global trade. The FLEGT licensing and implementing countries accounted for 48% of tropical trade in 2018. That rose to 52% in 2019. And this year, we reckon it could be up to 56% in 2020. And one of the key reasons for that is that Vietnam has been driving a very large rise in exports from tropical countries. In fact, trade from Vietnam, although it's been rising at a rate of about $1 billion a year in fact, for about the last 5 or 6 years. And this year, that rate of growth will no doubt slow. In fact, we're projecting at this stage a slight decline of only 2%, but that's still very good performance during this year of COVID. I'm going to focus a little bit on Indonesia because, of course, it is the only country that is already issuing Fleg T licensing. And although it's a very different makeup of products from Guyana, it does at least give an indication of the market benefits, the market implications of exporting products with a Fleg T license. Now, Indonesian exports have been rising. They were rising certainly between 2016 and 2018, although there was slight slippage in 2019. And this year, we reckon the exports from Indonesia globally will decline by about 6%, which again is quite a significant decline, but it is less significant than the declines from some other of the countries involved in the VPA process. For example, the implementing countries in Africa, there's 5 VPA implementing countries in Africa. The exports from those countries are likely to decline by about 23% this year as a result of COVID. But then just looking more closely at Indonesia, as I emphasized, this does provide certain lessons with regard to the impact of Fleg T licensing on trade flows, although for various reasons I'll explain, it's quite complicated assessing that impact at this stage. Now, Indonesia, the background of Indonesian wood products trade and the VPA process is that they have required actually mandatory certification under their legality verification system, the SVLK system, for all forests and wood products, and also required V-legal certificates for exports since 2014. And in Indonesia, the SVLK certification system is closely linked to another system for certification, the PHPL Sustainable Forest Management Certification System, which is being progressively extended to all forest types. So although SVLK is ostensibly a legality verification system, it is very closely tied with the Sustainable Forest Management Certification System, which I think covers about 25 million hectares of Indonesian forests. And one of the things that we found is that there is a very strong need to communicate the wider forest governance aspects and the contribution that Fleg T licensing and the VPA process makes to wider sustainability implementation in VPA partner countries. Of course, Fleg T licensing has been underway for products exported to the EU from Indonesia since November 2016. But as I emphasized, the impact on export flows is quite difficult to discern. It is to some extent obscured by a lot of the changes that are underway at present in the Indonesian forest product sector. There has been, you can see from this chart, in fact, which shows the breakdown of Indonesian log production by forest types over the last decade. In Indonesia, there has been a very major shift in the raw material supply base. In Indonesia, much more plantation timbers are coming out of Indonesia now. There's a big reduction in the amount of timber coming from conversion forests. And this is itself partly associated with the implementation of the SVLK and the PHPL system. And of course, during the last 10 years, there has been incredible volatility in wood markets generally, intense competition in demand for wood products from various countries, from China, Vietnam. In Europe itself, there's a lot of competition from domestic producers, particularly in other EU member countries of Eastern Europe and indeed outside the EU, from Russia and Ukraine. This creates a very difficult market situation, quite a competitive market situation for tropical timbers generally, and more specifically for wood products which have a FLEGT license. So if we look at how the Indonesian wood products exports have changed over the last 5 years on a monthly basis, as the chart at the top shows, it shows that exports overall, they appear broadly flat. Although there are some very significant underlying shifts in that data, they're not particularly clear from this particular chart, but just to summarize them, there is still quite a focus in Indonesian exports on plywood and moldings and decking products, although that focus is beginning to fall. This trade in these more traditional products from Indonesia has been very volatile over the years, and that's something which hasn't changed. But at the same time, there has been a slow but reasonably consistent growth in exports of furniture and joinery products, more higher value products, particularly doors and laminates from Indonesia. The EU has been a relatively small part of the market for many years from Indonesia. And although it has risen a little bit in recent years, partly again, we think because of the FLEGT licensing system. In fact, in 2019, the EU plus the UK accounted for 16% of Indonesian wood product export value, which was a slight rise from 15% the previous year. Generally, exports from Indonesia to China are falling. The United States, Japan, and South Korea are becoming more dominant in exports from Indonesia. So there is a general shift in the Indonesian exports towards markets which already demand some sort of due diligence requirement. The EUTR in Europe, of course, the Lacey Act in the United States, the Japan Clean Wood Act. These countries are all demanding some form of assurance of that wood is legally sourced. Just looking more recently at trade flows this year from Indonesia, it's difficult to see any strong COVID signal in the data, by which I mean a sharp decline in exports from Indonesia this year. The only thing that you can say is that Indonesian trade, it does tend to decline quite sharply during the summer months because of the Ramadan season. Usually in May and June, there is a bit of a sharp downturn in trade from Indonesia. This year, that downturn started a bit earlier than usual, and there does seem to have been quite a strong rebound in trade from Indonesia in the last few months or so. Now, of course, as I said, Guyana, a very different export wood profile. I think Fabian made that very clear in his presentation. Much more limited range of products, generally declining market for wood products from Guyana over the years, declining exports. The latest data for all 46 reporting countries in the STIX database, which is shown on this slide, shows that there's been a general downward trend in Guyana exports to those countries over the last 5 years. And in fact, in 2020, there was only around $3 million per month being exported to these 46 leading countries around the world by Guyana. And this couple of slides highlights that same trade flow, but looking by destination country on the left-hand side and by product group on the right-hand side. A number of things are immediately obvious. The importance of China in exports from Guyana, and it's the decline in exports to China and to some extent to India, which explains why there's been this rather long-term decline in exports. The exports to those countries have been declining, principally of logs, over the last 3 or 4 years. The United States is the principal market for the more higher value sawnwood exports from Guyana, and that market's been much more stable and in fact was slightly growing until the end of 2019. European countries don't feature strongly at this stage in the list of countries which are importing wood products from Guyana. The UK is the largest EU importer of wood products. Again, that's principally sawnwood. I think that trend, the market there has been growing. I've got some other slides which show that market trend has been upwards into the UK over the last few years or so. Just turning to the EU market generally for tropical wood products, there has been quite a significant change actually in the EU market for tropical wood products in the last 2 years. There's been quite good growth in EU tropical wood products imports during that period. In fact, in 2019, total tropical wood and wood furniture imports increased 1% to 4.4 billion last year, and that followed a more substantial increase by 6% in 2018. The share of tropical wood has also increased slightly in EU imports in the last couple of years, increased from 22% in 2018 to 23% in 2019. And that's quite a significant development in the sense that previous to that, the share of tropical wood in EU imports had been falling from over a period of about 10 years, from 2005 to 2015. It fell from about 30% down to 22%. And then it was hovering at this lower level for some time. So there are signs it might be just beginning to increase now. EU imports from Indonesia increased 6% to $900 million in 2019. So Indonesia has been very much at the forefront of this general rise in tropical imports recently. And again, we like to think that the FLEGT licensing may have had some impact on that. EU imports from VPA implementing countries in 2019 were also rising, 3% from Africa, and Vietnam was increasing 4% to nearly $1 billion last year. Tropical products imports were also making grounds from countries outside the VPA process last year, particularly Brazil and India. Brazil made a lot of ground in imports of decking and sawn wood, tropical sawn wood, and India mainly in the furniture sector. Now, just looking at the COVID impact on trade with the EU, the tropical wood trade with the EU. Although initially at the beginning of this year or earlier this year, we were expecting a very severe decline in tropical wood products imports into the EU, the latest trade does seem to suggest it's been less severe decline than first feared. In May this year, there was, yes, a very drastic decline in imports of tropical wood products into the EU. This was during the first period of lockdown in the EU. Imports fell about 1/3 against the 5-year average during that month, although there was a very strong recovery then in June and July. In the period to the end of August, we've currently got data to the end of August for EU imports. They were 2.58 billion, which is 18% less than the same period last year, which actually was quite a strong year. And in fact, imports this year seem to be running at the level, at the lower level of around 5 years ago in 2015 to 2016. So yes, a downturn, but perhaps not as severe as we were expecting earlier in the year. And there's a number of reasons for that. The EU market for DIY timbers, for garden timbers, which of course is very heavily one of the major markets for tropical wood products in the EU, remained relatively buoyant even during the lockdown. In fact, partly because of lockdown, a lot of people took the opportunity to do a lot of garden work to improve their homes. There were some major markets for tropical wood products in the EU, notably the Netherlands, for example, did avoid a full lockdown. Their construction sector remained relatively active during that period. And of course, the EU has seen a very strong fiscal stimulus package being introduced in an effort to boost the economy during this difficult period. And this is focused quite heavily on construction. And the construction sector, although it has weakened this year, again, it has received something of a boost from these stimulus measures, which are in the pipeline now. Although now there is a very significant concern about the potential long-term fallout as government support it will be withdrawn over the long term, and of course the debt levels in the EU are mounting as a result of this. So the long-term economic prospects are looking uncertain, but in the short term, things have not been quite as bad as first thought. This is EU imports from Guyana over the last 5 years or so. These are 12-month rolling averages, figures to give some sort of sign of the longer-term trend. They iron out all the seasonal variations. And one thing is immediately apparent. There was quite a big decrease in imports from Guyana into the EU back in 2015. Although since 2016, imports mainly of sawnwood have been rising fairly consistently. I say EU imports because actually a lot of those have been destined for the UK, and it's particularly sawnwood. Some logs are being imported into the EU. Most of those are destined for the Netherlands, of course, where they're used for water protection works mainly. So it's a fairly intermittent market. There has been growth over the last 5 years into the UK specifically. The other markets, it's fairly inconsistent imports on a monthly basis. But again, you can see here there was quite a large import of, compared with the long-term trend, a relatively large import of logs in this year already. In this year, there has been a little bit of an increase of logs, particularly into the Netherlands. Just turning back, looking at Indonesian trade with the EU over the last 5 years. Again, just to highlight some of the trends that we think may be boosted by the VPA process and FLEGT licensing, which began in November 2016. There wasn't an immediate positive story to tell when licensing was first introduced back then. If you look, actually, a lot of the trade was declining at that time. And in fact, it was a time of extreme weakness of European currencies on international exchange markets. So that might have been one reason why there was a bit of a decline that continued even after licensing came into effect. However, since from about the middle of 2017, some markets have done quite well for FLEGT licensed wood from Indonesia. You can see particularly the furniture market, in fact, grew extremely strongly last year in certain countries of the EU. Also, the market for joinery products, laminates for kitchen tops and doors particularly was growing very strongly last year. Also, the market for plywood was rising quite consistently until the middle of 2019 from Indonesia. It's the same with moldings. These are mainly decking products for the garden sector. And then the markets diverged a little bit. Starting the middle of last year, the EU economy weakened. There was a lot of competitive pressure for plywood from Indonesia, from the Russian birch plywood, a lot of competition for decking products from Brazil particularly, and that market for Indonesian products began to weaken. However, the imports of furniture continued to rise quite strongly even until the beginning of this year. A lot of that was driven particularly by imports into the Netherlands. There's been very strong growth into the Netherlands. And here's the UK, the second largest market in the EU region for Indonesian products. Again, that started declines from the middle of last year. That was due primarily to the weakening plywood and decking products market. And Germany, third biggest market, followed a fairly similar trajectory to the market in the UK. And then we have the Belgian market here, much flatter over the long term, and the same with France. But certainly, we think the VPA process and the licensing process might have benefited particularly furniture imports into the Netherlands, and certainly decking and plywood have done quite well in the UK market, and also joinery product. A lot of the doors from Indonesia go into the UK. We've also been getting a lot of feedback from regular surveys. The IMM does interview several hundred companies in the EU every year, asking very specific questions about the impact of the FLEGT on their procurement practices. We also had, or we did before the COVID pandemic came along, we were having 2 or 3 trade consultations every year where we invited a large number of companies from specific markets in the EU and asked them a lot of questions about their about the role of the flag tea in their market, in the development of their markets. We've also undertaken an investment study looking at the impact of the flag tea process on specifically on investment flows into Indonesia and into Vietnam, 2 countries where there's quite a lot of good data on investment flows. And that involves surveys with the private sector in both countries. In Indonesia, it was quite clear that the private sector did attribute quite a significant rise in investment in Indonesia to at least partly to the voluntary partnership agreement and the extent which it had improved the regulatory environment and also the image of the country amongst international investors. The trade surveys have also revealed some quite positive issues with regard to the market benefits of flag tea licensing. For example, there's very clear evidence from the survey this year that licensing is making importing from Indonesia much easier compared with other countries which have no licensing in the light of the EU timber regulation. Having said that, the license is not as a determining factor. It's not able to override other significant competitiveness issues. Buyers tend to put the emphasis on price, of course, on quality, logistics when deciding where to buy their products from and which products to buy. And the licensing is only a sort of secondary issue for many buyers. Once they've decided on which product they're going to buy, they find it a useful way of overcoming the challenges which occur for many other products from other countries of demonstrating compliance with the EU TR regulations. Another thing that came out very clearly from our trade consultations with EU importers, one of the things we did ask them, giving them lots of options, is what do you think is the best strategy to rebuild market share for tropical wood products in the EU? Of course, there has been a gradual loss of share, certainly in the period between about 2005 and 2017-18, there was a loss of share for tropical wood products in that market. And the feedback we got was very clear that importers, very strong support from importers who believe that flag tea combined with the EU timber regulation is the best strategy to rebuild share in the EU market as a way of demonstrating a serious commitment to responsible procurement and to legal verification. There was, however, a call for consistent enforcement of the EU TR across the EU and a continuing effort to extend flag tea licensing. One of the issues that was constantly raised is that there simply is not a large enough array of countries issuing flag tea licenses and a wide array of products, which means at this stage it limits its relevance to the wider market. Having said that, we're also getting a lot of feedback to the effect that the TLAS systems are benefiting markets other than the EU, which of course there are a wider range of countries now demanding due diligence and due care requirements. And there is much emphasis in all that we've heard from the trade, much emphasis on the need for communication, something which was mentioned before, and not just a broad requirement for communication. There needs to be a very focused communication strategy developed for each country with a clear allocation of roles between government, trade and industry and associations and NGOs. It has to be a data-driven communication strategy, specifically targeted on business-to-business communication, specific product sectors which are relevant. In the case of Indonesia, to products like furniture, specific furniture products and plywood. In Guyana, of course, we'd be looking specifically at market development for sawnwood, for water protection works and that sort of thing. There needs to be very consistent messaging across these strategies, and an emphasis very much on the very strong positive narrative of governance, and linking that to the implementation of sustainable forest management and the other carbon benefits of using FLEGT licensed timber. Now, just briefly, I probably haven't got very much time. I will just briefly mention some of the developments in other markets other than the EU, just to highlight some of the effects of COVID and the long-term implications for the trade. In China, of course, a very large market for primary wood products from a wide range of tropical countries, including Guyana. The economy in China was slowing in 2019 due to a lot of domestic problems internally, and also the US-China trade dispute. And this led to quite a significant decline in tropical log and sawnwood imports into the country. Although China has definitely got to grips with the pandemic relatively early, and already it looks like China will be the only large economy to grow in 2020. In fact, GDP growth in China this year is likely to be around 2%, where other major economies are all likely to decline quite significantly. There's a bit of a change in the import profile into China. Imports from the Solomon Islands, from Cameroon and Thailand are recovering already, but imports from countries like Papua New Guinea, Mozambique, Laos, Equatorial Guinea, Vietnam, Indonesia are much reduced this year compared to previous years. And of course, we're also keeping a very close eye on the development of the forest law, Article 65, which effectively states there is a prohibition on any trade in wood which is known to derive from illegal sources. So we're looking at what the regulatory implications and developments will be from that, and whether that will in time lead to some sort of due diligence requirements on imports into China. At this stage, that development is somewhat uncertain. In the United States, of course, the largest market for Guyana sawnwood, the United States has seen a continuous rise in imports from tropical countries between 2016 and early 2020, but that was driven almost exclusively by furniture from Vietnam and to a lesser extent from Vietnam. This year, there has been a bit of a decline in tropical wood imports, by which I mean furniture imports from those countries, although it seems to have been a fairly short and sharp decline, and there's been a very strong rebound, particularly from Vietnam. And in fact, only imports from India were struggling to recover this year in recent months. It has to be said, prospects in the United States are extremely uncertain. We've had, of course, the US elections on top of the pandemic. We still have the ongoing US-China trade dispute. What will the new US administration, what will their trade relations be like with other countries, not only China, but of course with Vietnam? But there's an ongoing US Department trade representative investigation into Vietnam trade just at the present time. So it's difficult to say what the prospects will be longer term in the United States. And then finally, just to end with a comment on the development of legality verification and environmental assurance requirements in global trade. One thing that I can say from analyzing the trade data is that there has been a significant increase in the proportion of wood which is being exported to what we call regulated markets, those where there is a due diligence requirement. In fact, in 2019, something like 67% of all tropical wood products imports worldwide were into these regulated markets, an increase from 62% in 2018. And that's not even including China. If China is included and they do introduce some sort of due diligence requirements, that rises to something like 84% of global trade. At the same time, we heard mention earlier today of the green measures in crisis recovery packages. A very large amount of money is being devoted to green measures to promote a circular economy, energy efficiency, low carbon, ecosystem restoration, health and well-being. In a lot of countries, the economic stimulus measures are very much focused on this. In fact, the OECD estimates that these amounts to something of the order of 312 billion US dollars by the major economies. So in short, it demonstrates firstly that this demand for legally verified timber, sustainably managed timber, is not going to go away. And in fact, there are many new opportunities for wood products where there is a credible demonstration of legal and sustainable supply supported, and this is particularly important, it must be supported by effective communication strategies. And I'll leave it there. Thank you very much for listening, and I shall now hand over to Vanessa.
Thank you, Rupert. And I hope that persons can see me. I have had to change to my phone. All sorts of challenges this morning. So thank you, gentlemen, for your presentations. And I'd like to thank our viewers and listeners for staying online with us for this very important information that has been shared with us thus far this morning. Just as we go into the question and answer session, I'd like to just remind persons to keep their questions short and to the point. We are tracking what persons are sending to us in the chat section, and I will share some of these with our panelists so that they can, provide some responses. We apologize again that we have had a late start, and that has resulted in us running a bit over time this morning, but I crave your indulgence as we try to finish off this session. So thank you. Just remember to, raise your hand, and remember that the session is being recorded. I would like to give you the assurance that the PowerPoint presentations throughout these 3 days will be made available for all participants at the end of the day. So maybe to start off, I'd just like to ask a quick question to particularly Fabian, because we'll be speaking about trade and what the numbers have been over time. But I think persons still are interested in how are we going to recover as a country, Guyana. And so, of course, we would have expected that because of the lockdown, fewer persons would have been in the field, cutting logs. And so how are our production levels going to recover in the next year? Do you have any comment on that? Perhaps you or Kenny would like to respond to that as I go to the other questions. Thanks.
Let me start by saying that there has been move by the GFC and moreover move by the government of Guyana to assist the sector in helping the sector to recover from the whole impact of the pandemic. And since persons are unable to go in what we would have deemed the COVID budget, the government outlined some measures which is there to assist all concessionaires and persons within the sector by offering tax concessions and offering to investment in the road network, just to name a few. So there are incentives there for concessionaires and others to go back into the sector and to help promote the sector in reaching our true potential.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Fabian. So hopefully that will help to shorten the recovery time post-COVID.
Yeah.
All right. Kenny, David, a question for you from John Palmer. When will the GFC restore publication of the monthly FPDMC trade reports? Would you like to comment on that? Kenny David, please.
Sure. Thanks, Vanessa. I think, the trade reports, the FPDMC itself has had some issues in the last year or more, I would say. In fact, so I think, and I do agree, the trade reports I think were quite a useful feature of the FPDMC. What we have been discussing recently at the government level is to have the resuscitation of the FPDMC, if I can put it that way. And so, yes, I think as soon as we can, so in the coming weeks, in fact, we will have quite a number of discussions. I think it's also trying to understand how best to place some of these other aspect of work that the GFC does, whether we want to. So maybe the timing is also good to have a broader discussion on where some of these things fit in the larger GFC sort of structure. But yes, those reports and I agree with Mr. Palmer, are very, very important. And hopefully in the coming months, I would say I don't see it being realistic before the end of the year, but efforts are being moved to get those reports back up and running.
Okay, thanks, Kenny. And while you're on the floor, James Hewitt is asking if there is market scope for the EU-Guyana VPA confined to the EU and the UK, and if so, why?
Why is it confined to the EU?
Yeah, so is it confined to the EU and, of course, the UK, seeing that they're leaving the Union, and if so, why?
I mean, if I'm understanding the question correctly, I mean the VPA is between EU and partner countries, and so, but it's not confined in that sense. I think for Guyana, what we have done is we are developing the TLAS and the systems in country for all stakeholders, and so I think while we think of the VPA as EU access or access to the EU market, that is fine, but I think on a much broader and sort of scope is that we are developing the entire, all stakeholders will be at that level, that new, let's say that new established level once we've got the FLEC licenses. So I think that in a way opens up the markets in a much broader. So FLEC licenses, yes, for the EU, but again, any other country outside of that is buying timber is still buying timber that has met that minimum standard as well.
Okay, thanks, Kenny. A question for you, Rupert, and this is from Dr. Rory Fraser, and he's asking, how are the changes in the Indonesian exports affecting sustainability of traded species, investment and development of the value-added sector, and the forest communities involved?
Yeah, there's quite a lot of questions in there. It's actually quite a difficult question to answer, and one that to be honest, I'm probably not the best person to talk to about that, because we focus very much on the export market impacts rather than the internal impacts on the trade and industry. From what we can gather, though, we have done an investment study, and as I emphasized, it's still quite early days with that, because the research on investment is still only just beginning. We did one preliminary study, which does seem to indicate that it is improving, or it not alone, because obviously there's a lot of factors here, but it is contributing to an improvement in the investment environment in the forest sector in Indonesia. It's something that has to be done, goes hand in hand with a lot of other measures that have to be implemented by the government. Certainly, the furniture sector in Indonesia, they have mixed views, it has to be said, on the impact of the FLEGT licensing system. Those that have bought into it, those that are, and certainly in the plywood sector, for example, we get quite a lot of feedback from them to the effect that it is enhancing their market development. It is enhancing their ability to market their products around the world, not only in the EU but elsewhere. There are issues, though, of course, as there are anywhere, I think, with regard to concerns about the possibility of raising costs for smaller operators. And I know that's been quite a big issue within the VPA discussions and within the development of new systems for smaller operators to ensure that they are not excluded from the process. So certainly it's a mixed picture, but the feedback we are getting is generally positive. And yes, I guess that's where we stand at the moment.
Thank you, Rupert. All right, so Kenny and Fabian, back to you at the Forestry Commission. Here's a question from Shalima Fakira, and she's making reference to the level of deforestation rate as a result of gold and bauxite mining. And she's wondering whether there is any collaborative discussion of these industries in ensuring there's best practices to facilitate the final approval of the agreement. Fabian or Kenny?
Sure. Thanks, Vanessa. I think it's an excellent question. On the short answer is yes. I think that the long answer is And I think one of the other positives, I think, of the VPA is, as I mentioned in my earlier presentation, is that we have actually had to bring together a number of agencies, one of which is the GGMC in this larger discussion. And so what that in fact has started. Now, I mean, I think we can appreciate it's not the easiest of discussions to have. You know, when you talk about the extraction of gold and forest, it's not an easy discussion to have, but I think it has created a very useful space. In fact, if you look at how the VPA has been designed, we actually have managed to capture timber, because there was also a question of what if timber is coming from big, rather than cut, destroy, burn. But so I think the two things we need to think about: one, just how much of an impact is it having, and then if it is going to happen, and it's clear that it will happen, how do we do it in a manner that we still get benefits from the timber that is often cut and from these areas that are cleared for mining? And so we've actually captured in the VPA systems that can be followed to ensure that at least if an area has to be mined, you know, that it's you know, there is a discussion that happens ahead to say yes, the timber can be used, and how do we make the best use of that timber? If we need to get an approval for the guys who are harvesting to go in earlier, because often mining and so on. So there is a discussion. I think, as I said, it is not the easiest of discussions to have, because again, sometimes they are seen as two opposing rather than you know, you're trying to achieve, you know, or working in the same space. But yes, I think the VPA has allowed for that discussion, and I think it's one that has been ongoing even outside of the VPA, and hopefully we can land at a place that I think works for all of us.
Good, Kenny. I'm sure it's a good work in progress and something that needs to be kept at, so that we can ensure that there's optimum use of all our resources, all our natural resources. Yeah. So Patrice has a question also for you, Kenny. And she is asking about, I'm sorry if it's male or female, but the question is about the negotiation process of the VPA. What are the main bottlenecks, the challenges, political and technical challenges? And what advice Guyana would give to other countries considering entering into VPA negotiations? Very good question. I'm sure there's a lot that you can say, Kenny, but let's see how quickly we can, you know, condense it into a very good response. Thanks.
Sure. I think in terms of time, you know, VPAs are never going to be short processes unless you have, you know, it's never going to be easy. I think what we found as well is that the stakeholders are very diverse and very spread out, not only in what they want out of the sector, out of these agreements, but also in our case, just the geography of where people are. How do you get to them? And I think for us, we you know, it took some time to be able to get to all the stakeholders and to keep them in the conversation. As you know, we've had a lot of connectivity issues and so on. So you couldn't do as we're doing now. Even now, it's still very challenging to a lot of stakeholders to be in this conversation. And so I think it was first of all trying to ensure that you had all the stakeholders, and sometimes you know you need to get it right. My advice, I think, would be get it right in terms of stakeholders. Who should be part of the discussion, and at what level? I think also the sheer cost of keeping of having this type of engagement as well. I think you know, sometimes we didn't realize just how much it costs to have such massive consultations being done at a national level. And getting the views of people. And I think also, as you can imagine, if you're going to have 100, 200 people in a room, it's never going to be easy to land on a common area or a common agreement. And so sometimes you have to have these discussions a number of times. And I think that in itself, you know, poses its own challenge. And as I said, funding, I think as well, is very, very critical. You need to be, countries getting involved in it need to be very, very certain of where they want to go. It's going to take a lot of resources. Whether donor or government, as in our case, the government would have put quite a bit, and we also require a lot of donor support as well. But without which, you know, and I think that is what actually hampered us in the earlier years, where once we had agreed we want to go down that road, it took some time to get that additional support that we really required to get things going. I think, of course, it's no secret, elections tend to always have impacts on these processes like these, even if whether governments are changing. You know, it's always going to cause you're going to lose months quite easily. You know, and of course, COVID hasn't helped. But I think if my advice would be, if I'm, for countries getting involved, I think, be clear of what you want out of the VPA. I think be absolutely clear, be absolutely clear where your stakeholders are as well. I think sometimes if we tend to see this sort of glorified sort of FLEC position. Yes, when issuing FLEC licenses, but I think we need to also understand just how far that is from where your stakeholders are, and then once you understand that, you'll understand what it'll take to bridge that gap, because sometimes it can be quite a large distance. I would. And last, but I think maybe there's so much more I can say, but I think also, learn from others. I think VPA processes, every country is unique. Every country is different, certainly. But, for us, I think it has been critical to learn from other countries that have gone down this road before. There was a lot I think you can avoid, which is why we've tried to put sessions like this as well together. There's a lot you can avoid and learn, gather, gain. If you can, ensure that you're learning from others, and always keep your civil society groups close to your heart. Let them be really right there, always in the conversation. They can really have an impact, both good and bad, if you're not keeping them in the conversation.
Excellent, Kenny. I think you gave us a very good synopsis of the areas that helps you through the process of the VPA, the negotiations, and moving forward. And maybe it's a good time to register again our thanks. I'm saying this as a Guyanese, to our development partners who have been helping us over the years, that we have gotten thus far in the VPA FLEC process, and will continue to walk with us as we finalize the agreement. I believe that we should be wrapping up now. And so I'd just like to look quickly at maybe one other question. So I think we had the one from Patrice. Forgive me, I'm moving back and forth from my phone to my thing. But let me reiterate, because I know that there are persons putting questions in the chat, and there is some feedback back and forth amongst you, and some feedback from the commission itself and others. I wanted to reiterate the point, and maybe to make persons aware that exportation of green heart from Guyana is not banned. You have those companies, including the Wakram International Center, that have international certification, which is an add-on to the Guyana Forestry Commission's excellent protocols and regulations to maintain markets in the European Union and other markets overseas. So Commissioner James Singh has that in his present in the chat box, and he is saying that there is about 25% of total the total log production. 25% of that are log exports. So that I know that's a concern about persons. So I think it's a good way to inform persons of where that particular issue is. And we would know recently, and the minister mentioned earlier in the opening session, about the government's policy with regard to the log exports. So please look in the chat box at the side to the right of your screen, so that you can follow some of the feedback that is coming through from our colleagues at the Guyana Forestry Commission. Is very helpful. I'd like to thank you all for your participation. We have over 100 participants at the time. I believe there were over 125 when last I checked. So, we're very grateful to you, and we are aware as well that the participants are not only from Guyana, but from Central Africa and from Asia, and our partners and colleagues in Europe and in the Caribbean region, and so on. So thank you for joining us. And I'm sure that you would like to join me in thanking the presenters this morning in our market trends, the global market trends. Remember, there was a presentation from Fabian Jones from the Forestry Commission, and our friend from the ITTO, who gave us some very good insight into the global market rate, Rupert Oliver. So thanks to them. Thank you very much to the translators who have been excellent in, making it possible for persons who are English and Spanish speakers, and I believe French as well, to follow this discussion.